Super Bowl.
Brady goes for the deep shot. He's got a touchdown.
And Mahomes at bay.
The Tampa Bay Bucs, Super Bowl 55.
Hello and welcome to the Bucs Banter podcast, your favorite destination for all things Tampa Bay Buccaneers. NFL draft, in-season analysis, hot and cold takes. This is the spot to be. I am joined by my co-host Scott Capron. Scott, what is good, my friend? How are you?
Oh, I'm doing okay, man. The people want to know about my first round of the year. I'm sure I'm still you haven't heard about this yet, but I'm still reeling from a triple bogey on the 18th hole yesterday, about to shoot my best score ever. So I hope the Bucs fans are ready to talk about that. Really go through all the stages of grief. And I'm just kidding. Let's talk about the draft.
Well, I'm sorry to hear it didn't work out, but it sounds like you're starting the year off on the right foot nonetheless.
That's one way to put it. It's not how I'm saying it. It's certainly not how I've been looking at it all day like a lunatic, but here we are,
Well, thankfully there's no video footage or anything of your meltdown on 18 then.
Much appreciated. And we'll just leave it at that.
So, on the docket for this evening, we are going to break down my latest Bucs 7-round mock draft, which went up on SI.com and BucsGameDay.com earlier this week. In fact, a part of it went up on Buccaneers.com. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers shared a snippet. So I guess, Scott, I am officially a draft expert according to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right?
I mean, you've been one in spirit for so long, but to get that validation on the Bucs website and to see your name pop up was pretty cool, man. Pretty legit. Peter Schrager, Mel Kiper, Colin Hallboom, just throwing them all up there. But no, in all seriousness, that was really sick. Can't wait to talk about it.
For sure. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through my Bucs 7-round mock draft. We're gonna talk about the players, and we're gonna use that as a guide of sorts to dig a little bit deeper into some of the players I think could be in play for the Buccaneers. And also I'm going to highlight the names. I've narrowed it down to about 13 players. Whether that's considered narrowing it down, I don't know. But 13 players who I can see being selected in the first round by the Bucs. Probably closer to 10. But there's about 10 names I think I'd be shocked if it wasn't one of those 10 guys. So we can talk about that a little bit and just some other names. And then we're gonna discuss some of my top breakout candidates for this upcoming season for the Buccaneers, at least the defensive side tonight. We'll see. I'll have an article coming out on that. So anyone listening is going to get a sneak peek of that information before it is published on the internet.
Okay. So yeah, man, that sounds great. So you still think it's at 10, hey? At this point in the process, you still think it's at 10?
I think it's pretty wide open, man, in terms of what position they could go. So yeah, I do think it could potentially be as many as 10. Again, I could narrow it. If you wanted me to, I could tighten it up more than that for damn sure. But I think for now, we're far enough away still, and there's enough uncertainty that I'd prefer to keep it in the double-digit realm.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. So in the first round, 27th overall, I have the Buccaneers selecting Travis Jones, big defensive tackle out of the University of Connecticut. We have talked about him a fair bit because I've had him there for quite some time, and I wasn't able to move off that selection at this point. I still think adding a defensive tackle to pair alongside Vita Vea for the long haul is at the top of the Buccaneers priority list. At least it would be mine. And, I feel that way regardless of what happens with Ndamukong Suh. I mean, I hope they bring him back still. But as I've said before, I do think that would be an ideal position to address, especially because the very top tier is so small in terms of interior defensive linemen. And one of those guys is too similar. Davis from Georgia is just too similar to Vita Vea, right? So that really narrows it down to two guys, which is Devontae Wyatt, the other Georgia defensive tackle. And I just don't see him being there at 27 because of what I just mentioned. So as much as I would love him, I think he's a little more of a pass rusher, or at least has a little more potential to develop as such, which kind of fits the mold of what would be best suited beside Vita Vea. I just think there's going to be another team that's going to pounce on him before 27. Travis Jones.
Where do you think he goes? Where do you think he goes?
There's a number of spots he could land. He could go in the teens to Philly. The Cowboys could take him. The Titans or Bills could take him right before, even though I know the Bills have added some juice there. There's honestly a ton of teams because NFL teams just understand the importance of an interior rush. And so it's it's hard to truly have a good pulse for all of these different teams and what their real draft needs are or what their priorities are.
Okay, so I just want to throw out a couple of hypotheticals at like with this pick then. So is the gap between the Georgia tackle and the UConn tackle, is that worthy? If let's say he isn't picked, the Georgia tackle, he isn't picked and we're at pick 21. I just thrown out a number. Yeah. Is there a big enough gap between those two guys that would justify Light trying to trade up, in your opinion?
Interesting. Great question. I think probably not. I just can't see Jason Light doing it. It's close to, and like I want to talk myself into it.
Right.
But I just think that the team has a number of areas that they need to address. And I think if anything, the play would be to move back into the second, like say back 10 picks or even less. Pick up another pick or two in the mid rounds and then draft Travis Jones still if you think he might still be there.
Okay. So you love you're very high on Travis Jones and you would be very much okay with it at this point.
I would. Yeah. Okay. I would be okay with it. I mean, unless they're in love with there's other guys who you could get later in the second, like someone like a Perion Winfrey out of Oklahoma, who is a bit of a smaller built defensive tackle, but kind of a speed power rusher from the inside. He's a guy who would fit nicely next to Vita Vea. He crushed it at the Senior Bowl just like Travis Jones did. He won MVP of the Senior Bowl. I think he had 2 sacks in the actual game too. That's a guy so if that's the case, then maybe you take a corner. If a corner slips, if an Andrew Booth Jr. from Clemson were to switch, I would take him at 27 over Travis Jones.
Yeah.
For example.
And this is the fascinating part about having a pick late in the first round, like for a fan base, because there's so many sliding doors and so much can happen ahead of you in those like what 3.5 hours kind of before you pick eventually at 27, right? So always an interesting spot because obviously you're picking late, so your team's generally pretty good if you have that choice. But certain things happen, man, and that's I kind of like the back end of the first round for that because it's way less predictable and anything can happen. I mean, obviously when unpredictable stuff happens at the top, that's what we talk about. And that's more, earth shattering in terms of the history of that draft kind of thing. Right. But the Bucs are in a super interesting spot. I can't wait to see what they do.
Yeah, man. Well said. And I think Bucs fans got their first taste of that in a long time, a very long time last year, right? You just sit back like the very end. They got to just sit back, Jason Light, and watch how things unfolded. And it just gives you more time to kind of assess what's going on and weigh your options in terms of trade opportunities. And that's something Jason Light is always extremely active with is evaluating his options. And he's going to be on the phone with everyone. So trade back is a legit possibility and something I wouldn't be opposed to depending how things shake out.
Okay.
Go.
No, I was just going to say, so make the case for the UConn tackle. Why is he so good? And let's face it, let's say a first round pick, if you have that brand, if you have that title, it just you're held to a different standard. That for better or worse, the 27th pick versus the 34th pick, so the second pick in the second, it's just a different label that goes with you basically throughout your career, right? Just tell me, why is this guy a first round pick in your eyes?
Well, he's certainly got the size and the strength. I mean, he's an athletic freak for one, like totally. Like I in my mock draft, I talk about just sort of the historical perspective of his performance for his position. And he ranks 48th out of almost 1,500 defensive tackle prospects evaluated at the combine between 1987 and this year. So just to put some context on just how special I'm talking. And I mean,
to be fair, at the 1989 combine, they were measured on how many darts they can smoke, right? Like, I mean, the the 3-cone drill was like slamming a beer, having a dart, and like smoking some weed too, right? So just look for context for the people out there.
Great point. And I think with Travis Jones, it comes down to, I mean, he's been playing it at the University of Connecticut, just an abysmal football program. I think they have like 4 wins in his entire career there.
They
No
need
fault
to
of his
stop
own.
playing. They need to
Yeah.
stop playing. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, someone needs to hire Rashad Anderson as the athletic director and just cut that program out from the knees. It is so bad.
Nice UConn basketball reference. We always got
Whenever
to
I
sneak
can.
those in. I would have
Whenever I
preferred
can.
a Denham Brown reference, but here we are.
I know.
But so because of that, he's kind of slid under the radar, right? But again, not to overblow the importance of the combine or the Senior Bowl, but at the same time, for certain players, that is their first chance to really get eyes on them playing legit competition. So for some people, it's much more important than others.
Exactly.
And for Travis Jones, a guy coming out of UConn, that's incredibly important, right? Like, he's not going up against SEC bangers like first round draft picks.
No.
So he gets to the Senior Bowl and he's just dominating quality interior offensive linemen, really well established prospects, and just continuing to do so. And I think that is kind of what caught the eyes. Then you throw in the combine performance, and then everyone runs back to the tape, and the tape speaks volumes as well. So just all of those things combined with the scarcity of high-end talent at the position. And in my opinion, I like to always say take best player available. But I think the positional need here is a pretty important one for the Bucs, especially when you got, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka entering his second year, hopefully to take the reins on the edge opposite Shaq Barrett. Those guys need help, and the help's going to come from the interior, applying pressure to the quarterback that way. It opens everything up in the back end. They've addressed the safety group significantly. They've got returning cornerbacks, guys who are experienced, who have all played in a Super Bowl, started in a Super Bowl. So I just sort of feel like the way it's all lining up is it just makes a lot of sense. And that's why I'm sticking with him. But as I mentioned, they could take a cornerback or a safety or an offensive guard if they love the talent in that spot at 27 more than they do Travis Jones, and settle on a Logan Hall out of Houston, who's a bit of a tweener, right? But maybe, is he an edge guy? Is he an interior defensive lineman? He's an interesting player who I'm starting to find myself a little more intrigued by every day, really, the more I check out his stuff. And then there's some other names too further down. DeMarvin Leal is a guy he's kind of similar to Thibodeau, except he's not an edge rusher in the sense that he was considered a top 10 pick all year based off the talent, but his tape doesn't quite jump out at you as I think evaluators were hoping it would. But who knows, right? Some of these NFL guys, they might just be all on him, and this could just be what the media and everyone whose opinions we have access to is saying, and maybe they're way off, because that happens in the NFL draft.
No kidding, man.
Right?
And yeah, for sure. And I think you made the point earlier on. I mean, you like this pick regardless of if they re-sign Sue, right?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I really do. I just think then all of a sudden you're turning a major legitimate strength. You've got Sue there, you've got Vea there. Vea's not a 3-down lineman. He's too big, right? You got to keep him fresh. That's just going to benefit everyone, including the rookie you put in there, including Sue, who's a vet, and including Vea, who's just a big fella, and Will Golston. Like, I just love that, being able to just rotate those guys in, keep them fresh, keep applying pressure on the opposing offensive line.
It's just such a good situation for these young guys to get drafted into right now. Very little, as we discuss each pick and everybody in your mock here, the through line is that the Bucs are really good and that they're going to be really good, basically regardless of who they pick up in this draft, right? So just that flexibility that they're offered by being able to kind of really pick who they want, who they think fits with their team is so huge. And they don't have crazy pressure right away. Like, I thought what we saw from Tryon-Shoyinka last year was awesome. He clearly showed that he could play. Wasn't necessarily, leaned upon that much, but now he's going to be given even more of an opportunity to really take a leap. And that would be the same for basically whoever they end up taking in this first round. So
bang on. Well said.
Yeah.
And for anyone new or who isn't aware, Scott is not a Bucs fan. He's here because he's a knowledgeable football opinionist, and I value his opinion. So it's nice to get those unbiased perspectives. And so speaking of like Ndamukong Suh being an outstanding free agent at this point, unsigned, someone the Bucs are working and hoping to bring back, I think, and he's made it clear that he'd like to be back, but no news there. Again, adds to the importance of addressing the defensive tackle position.
What do you think happens there? Sorry to put you on the spot.
I think no, I like it. Put me on the spot, buddy. That's our job. Yeah, I think he'll be back. I think
so too.
It would be nice if it was before the draft. Just for the team's sake. But I have a feeling before the draft, Jason Light will have a pretty damn good idea of if he'll be back or not. If he's truly unsure, then that makes things a little more complicated for him. But I think he'll probably be back, and I hope so.
Yeah.
But the other big name, the other big domino yet to fall, of course, is Rob Gronkowski, and that's a player who I think people are becoming less and less confident in. And you remember several weeks ago, I put out a warning to Bucs fans to just kind of slow their roll and don't assume he's going to be back. And this week he did say in an interview, one of the late shows, I can't recall, but he said that if he's back, it'll be for the Buccaneers. So, I mean, that's not a huge shocker, but it sounds like he's genuinely a little bit conflicted at this point in terms of whether or not he is to return. I know his supermodel wife wants him to play, he said. So I didn't actually catch the whole interview, but David Harrison from Bucs Game Day, he put out a good article on that. So make sure you check that out, which is a good time to just kind of plug the website, si.com coverage of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We have got an insane amount of content coming out every day. It feels like every hour from some really high quality writers. So make sure you check out Bucs Game Day, Sports Illustrated Buccaneers website, where you'll also find plenty of my articles, including this one that we're ultimately discussing, the 7-round mock.
What a life for Gronk. He just kind of picks and chooses. Any team would want him. You know what I mean? Like retires, doesn't. How many games is he going to play? Totally up to him. He had the cheat code of training camp or showing his off-season workouts by just like, didn't he just change shirts or all on the same day, just wear different shirts and then send it as a different day of the week? You know what I mean? Like it's his world. We're just living in it at this point.
I know. And it's somehow like, I used to kind of assume he was a bit of a dick, like to be quite honest, when he was in New England. But he comes to Tampa and he keeps doing the same Gronkisms, and I love it. I love it. I love everything about him. All his teammates love him. He works his ass off once he's there. So some people are speculating that Gronk just wants to avoid like voluntary OTAs and like not have to report to OTAs and stuff. So who knows? I hope that, yeah, I mean, maybe that's the case. But as it stands, he's not on the team, and it's got to be more pressure on Jason Light and the rest of the Buccaneers player personnel department to address the tight end position. And again, similar to Suh, I think it's one they're going to want to address either way. If Gronk's back this year, I mean, who knows how much longer, especially if this is TB12's last kick at the can. So the tight end class I have, and I mentioned this on the pod last week, I have the Buccaneers taking Trey McBride with the 60th overall selection. That would be the first tight end off the board. And by Colorado State, that's the guy. Yeah. So, I mean, I think if he's there at 60, you got to seriously look at that. I mean, it just fits such a need. But I haven't really said this yet, but but Trey McBride and this tight end group, I mean, so you asked about the difference between, Wyatt and Travis Jones and the rest of the tackle class. Like that's a pretty significant gap. If you're talking about the difference between Trey McBride and say your fourth tight end or fifth guy could be Jeremy Ruckert at Ohio State, there is not a huge difference there. Okay. So this is one, again, much more dependent on the Gronk situation and really just about preference. Like, what is it? All I can tell you is I know the Buccaneers are going to want a guy who's capable of blocking because Cam Brate can't block. Cam Brate is not a good blocker. No. Gronk is a tremendous blocker. Both are good pass catchers. So you want a pretty well-versed guy. I already mentioned Jeremy Ruckert. I actually really like him. You could probably get him in the third round. Maybe you'd have to get him probably in the third round. He could even potentially slip to the fourth, but not where the Buccaneers would be selecting. But anyway, that's an option. Cade Otton out of Washington is a very similar profile to Jeremy Ruckert. Two guys who can catch, who can block, and do a little bit of everything. In the case of Jeremy Ruckert, the question is like McBride from Colorado State has shown the ability to like win balls vertically and run a more diverse route tree. Whereas Jeremy Ruckert, because Ohio State's been so good in the way they run their offense, they only need to use him in pretty basic offensive, employments per se. So that evaluation isn't available, but doesn't mean he can't do it, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, we see it all the time where guys are better in the NFL than their numbers or usage would have led people to believe based on what offense they played in college, right? So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and the purpose is to pick the guy who's going to be the best, not the guy who's the best in college, right?
Exactly.
So that's the art. That's the art of it all.
Yeah.
So the other name that's really interesting is Jelani Woods. Like if you're taking a guy for upside, the Virginia tight end, we've talked about him. I think he's like 6'7". He's really fast, but a bit more of a project potentially. So, I mean, those are some of the names there. Isaiah Likely out of Coastal Carolina is another guy. He could go in the second. He could go in the fourth. More of a pass catching tight end exclusively. Again, similar to Jelani Woods in that sense. They're more of like the high upside as a pass catcher. You'd hope they could develop as a blocker. So those are some of the other names if the Buccaneers wanted to address the tight end position later. As it stands of this moment, I've got him taking Trey McBride because I have him still on the board there. Another team could be in love with him and take him earlier, just the way this goes.
Yeah. Is he your favorite tight end?
Yeah, he's my favorite tight end.
He is your tight end. Yeah, okay.
I do really like Ruckert, though, the Ohio State guy. Like a lot of people have him below Cade Otton, below Jelani Woods. I have if you could get Ruckert in the third, like that would be, if I knew he would be there, for example, I'd have him mocked there. But I just don't know.
I mean, who knows? Maybe someone, I don't want to say reaches for McBride, but takes McBride a little bit earlier, and then you actually have Ruckert fall to you at a lower pick, and like, hey, that works too, right?
Yeah, and that's another like low key advantage, similar to what we said, like drafting at the end of the first, is just when you have different areas you could address, it puts you in less of a pressing situation to do anything irrational. And
exactly,
and Bucs fans should have confidence in Jason Light. He's not a panicky dude. Nor should any NFL general manager be. But let's be real. I mean, there's some guys who aren't quite built for this in those roles,
or they're picking to save their job, right? And they need to win this season. And such a bizarre work environment. Like I can't even imagine what that would be like. Like I don't know. You just mortgage everything to try to save your job. Like it's so weird. It's so unhealthy.
And it's all determined by other people.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
You're not in control of your destiny. You're just trusting the guy that you put your name behind and offer millions of dollars and to be the face of your franchise at certain positions.
That's why I'm always so shocked when like regimes or coaching staffs are let go. It's like, what'd you guys think? Like, you think you're going to be here for 25 years? Like, everyone just gets fired. That's how this works. Like, I'm so, when everyone's so upset or shocked or didn't see it coming, I'm like, well, I mean, basically, unless you're Mike Tomlin, like, you don't get fired. Like, I think he's the longest. I'm probably missing someone obvious, but he's as longest serving as anyone, right, in the NFL in a coaching role.
Belichick, obviously, but
obviously,
But yeah, Tomlin's right up there for sure.
Yeah. Oh, we just didn't. We didn't have the time. Well, how much time were you expecting? Like, fucking get over it.
More time than Frank Vogel to win a second title in LA. Talk about a scapegoat, eh? Rob Pelinka, just no accountability.
Pelinka sucks. And Vogel's just counting his money, doesn't have to coach that disaster team anymore. No one's blaming him for the season, and he'll just get another job because the NBA is unbelievable for recycling guys too. So, yeah, I don't think Vogel's too upset about it.
Good point. Great point. Moving along, I addressed the offensive guard position in the third round with Cole Strange out of Tennessee, Chattanooga. And this is a guy who I've also had the Bucs taking for quite some time now, dating back to my previous first Bucs 7-round mock draft that I did for NFL Draft Lounge. I had him going later back then in the 5th round when that looked to be the projection, but since then his stock has skyrocketed, and that's just not a realistic opportunity. Another guy who was at the Senior Bowl and performed really well there. He was willing to go over to center. So, I mean, I'm not going to spend too much time talking specifically about Cole Strange because the odds of him actually being on the team are pretty slim. But so I more want to use this as an opportunity to discuss the position.
Yes.
And in terms of interior offensive linemen, I mean, the left guard spot, that's where the vacancy is technically in Tampa due to Ali Marpet's retirement. Now, the Buccaneers are happy to take a committee approach. They're going to give Aaron Stinney the opportunity to win the job based on how the roster is set up as of today. However, there's two guys in particular, Zion Johnson out of Boston College and Kenyon Green out of Texas A&M. These are another two guys who would be on my top 10 legit chance to be Buccaneers in the first round. So if maybe that's a position the Buccaneers think is more important than others do, and they decide to just lock it in with one of these plug and play guys. Zion Johnson, in terms of the term plug and play, is the most ready. John Ledyard over at Pewter Report, one of the best talent evaluators in the game. Bucs fans are lucky that he's producing content on the Buccaneers. He's in love with Zion Johnson. He considers him a top 10 prospect in the entire draft. So, I mean, if he's there at 27, which in many cases is predicted to be a realistic possibility, then that's someone you got to look at right there. Kenyon Green at a Texas A&M, a little more of like, he's not as technically fundamentally sound as a Zion Johnson, but he's certainly got a really high upside. It's funny, right? When you're talking offensive linemen, it's like the whole upside thing isn't quite as appealing as the sturdy high floor.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's funny because I've obviously like talent evaluators and guys that are really breaking down the tape would be able to verbalize what high upside even means for an offensive lineman. But I don't think most NFL watchers they just want the guy that isn't giving up sacks, right? Like, well, we can kind of deal with the high upside. What else is he going to do? Is he also going to fight fires or what goes on? Right? So I don't know. I think that's, to me, especially an interior offensive lineman, I'm just looking for the guy that doesn't suck.
Yeah, fair enough, Scott. I mean, I think the upside is just like maybe all the physical tools, an insane amount of power, just needs to be coached up a little bit, kind of thing. But I totally get what you're saying. I like that. That's classic Scotty take.
It's easier to I don't know. It's easier to define with a receiver or like a skill position guy than I think for most people with what linemen can actually produce, right? So
hopefully the trench goat Brandon Thorne isn't watching, because he wouldn't like us talking about his position that way. I want to get him on this podcast one day. That's a goal.
That'd be awesome. I'm not knocking it. I'm just
saying,
I
know you're not.
People will get it in general.
Fair. A couple other names I like: Ed Ingram out of LSU in terms of interior offensive lineman. This is more in the Cole Strange territory, rounds 3, 4, maybe 2, 3, 4 even. Dylan Parham out of Memphis and Chris Paul out of Tulsa, one of two legit NFL offensive linemen that Tulsa sent into the league this year. So those are some names there. Not necessarily a dire need, but if there's a talent there, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Buccaneers address that position. In the fourth round, I have the Bucs adding a corner.
I hate this. If you draft Chris Paul, though, are you ever going to win a title?
Well, how funny is it? I just mentioned Chris Paul, and my fourth round pick for the Bucs is Kobe Bryant.
Oh my God, that is pretty wild.
Yeah, is that irony, coincidence? I don't know.
It's something. It's something, definitely.
But so Kobe Bryant, Ahmad Sauce Gardner's counterpart at Cincinnati is low key a heck of a player himself, and due to not an overwhelmingly impressive speed or combine scores, like vertical, all that stuff, it was definitely below average. I don't know the exact numbers offhand, but he's a guy who is very likely could be available in the fourth. He could go in the third. But it seems like if he's there, which according to my projections he very well could be, then that seems like a really nice pick if the Bucs haven't already addressed the position. Just because he's long, Bucs love tall corners if they're going to play on the outside. He's 6'2".
Wow.
He's versatile, right? He's played some nickel, he's played some safety. He's pretty well scheme proof. He could play, press man. He could fit into his zone scheme. That's the kind of thing you like. You got to be able to think the position, any position playing for Todd Bowles. That's for sure, because he loves to run exotic stunts, and it's a zone-based defense for your secondary. So it's a guy I think who could think the position well enough, and certainly have the length and the ball skills he can produce. Like he can catch the ball.
And to step up and make a tackle too, right? Which I think The Cincinnati secondary was great this year. I mean, they weren't playing the toughest competition, but with Gardner and him, like physical, long, just good players. 4th round seems like that would be a steal.
Yeah, for sure. And so I will say to add on to that, that's probably his biggest area to improve is he's whiffing on tackles a fair bit.
Mm,
But you're right. Like as a group, they were great at tackling since the Bearcats. They got a safety who will be drafted as well. So you're
yeah.
not wrong to say they knew what they were doing. But if anything, he would be the guy. That would be the area he could work on most. But
Tough to
there's
be a defensive player that needs to work on tackling. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
you don't really want that label attached to you.
yeah. Even if you're a corner, it's not all sexiness. Like you
No,
gotta have some
you
grit
gotta
to you. You
you gotta
gotta have
be
some grit
tough.
to you.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's so many fan bases. Every fan base is just completely frustrated with watching DBs who can't tackle. Like every fan base has experienced it. It's where we can all band together, no matter what colors you wear, no matter what team you cheer for.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, when you're watching the games, you expect no drops and you expect no missed tackles, right? It's a simple thing of like throw, catch, tackle in football. But when one of those basic things doesn't happen, it looks so ridiculous out there. And if you can't count on that, like if you can't count on making a tackle or making a catch, then it stands out and you just want to, it's just the worst thing ever, right? So yeah, you can't take those things for granted, but you also need to make every single one of those plays.
Yeah, well said. And we haven't had a basketball reference in almost 10 minutes. So reminds me of not collecting defensive rebounds, giving up
Oh
all
my
those
God.
boards, right? It's just
Exactly.
that feeling is just, it invokes the same feeling. In
You do
terms of
everything right. Yeah.
In terms of the cornerback position, though, this is one I could see the Buccaneers, if the right guy fell, addressing with their first overall pick, number 27, if the right guy was there. I already mentioned Andrew Booth Jr. out of Clemson. The top 4 corners or so, McDuffie, Stingley, Gardner, and Andrew Booth Jr., are all really good. Like CB1s in the NFL, like love them. So if one of those guys, and I think it would have to be Andrew Booth Jr. because the other guy's stock's just too high. If Andrew Booth Jr. were to fall, I'm all over it. I'm taking him and just not worrying about that position the rest of the draft. Unlikely, however. 2 names that could potentially be in play. Kyler Gordon out of the University of Washington. So he was Trent McDuffie's running mate. So we just talked about the 2 Bearcats cornerbacks. Well, here you got 2 out of 2 Washington Huskies. Kyler Gordon, a lot of people thought projected as a first-round pick. He didn't blow away the combine like a lot of people thought he did. So whether or not he's a surefire first-rounder, that's no longer the case, but he could still sneak in.
Mm-hmm.
But if the Bucs love him, Jason Light's going to take him. Jason, like they don't give a shit about our media perspective, right? They have their own boards and they're going to stick to him.
Wait. You're saying Light isn't going to listen to this and this isn't going to affect his board? Are you? I was promised certain things when I hopped on here, mainly that we would be influencing picks. So
I set you up too much to like take a dig at me and all the time I put into this, but you do it very diplomatically. So
it takes a lot out of me to do it diplomatically. So just, bear with me here, bud.
Appreciate it. And then Florida, Kaiir Elam, coming out of Florida, he's a late first, early second round graded player by most, and he certainly got the length, but the tape leaves a little bit to be desired, in my opinion. And the Buccaneers don't have the best resume of drafting corners out of Florida. Thanks to Vernon Hargreaves. So Vernon Hargreaves is like 5'10" tops, so that's a difference right there. But Kaiir Elam could be a guy. Another guy they've brought in, Roger McCreary out of Auburn. Bucs love Auburn DBs, that's for sure. Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean, both Auburn guys. They drafted an Auburn player last year in KJ Britt. So they like those boys from Auburn, and they've already had McCreary in for a visit. But his profile doesn't make any sense. Like it's all like you can't read too much into the visits. Often it's just based on convenience where the player is. They got their visit, so they use them. Want to get to know the players a little bit. McCreary has like historically short arms. I think we may have mentioned this on a previous pod, but
doesn't matter. It should be mentioned every time.
Yeah, I know you have.
He's got historically short arms. Then that's interesting. Like how short are we talking?
Like I don't know, like 28.
Like freakishly short?
Well, no, he doesn't look like an alligator, but
Well, in
He
my mind, I'm picturing that,
okay, well,
and
that's
quite
my fault.
frankly, I want to see it.
I
So
well,
here
when
we
I say
are.
historically, he would have the shortest arms of any cornerback in the NFL if he were drafted. So does that
Okay.
qualify? Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's ever. Yeah, that qualifies big
Not
time.
ever, currently. Let's say
Okay,
current.
currently, sure, I don't care. Whatever. I'm in my head, it's ever. So
Okay.
yeah, I mean, we're gonna be watching Bucs games. I want freaking short arm McGee on our team and seeing what the hell happens when the ball's in the air. So for entertainment purposes, please take Raj McCreary. But if not, put him on another team in the division so we can see him twice a year.
I like how you've coined him Raj from here on out.
I feel like he goes by Raj.
Yeah, you also coined that he's from Ireland last podcast. So I like how you got something new for old Raj McCreary from wherever Ireland. From
I thought that was Murphy Bunting.
oh, maybe I think it was a McCreary. Maybe I don't
Roger
know.
McCreary, he sounds like a Liverpool fan,
Your
don't you
your
think?
your cross country comparisons have just reached a whole new level of obscurity. It's just too hard to keep track.
But
We
they're
got
all 100% right
right, yeah.
and well researched. So remember that. Remember that, listeners.
But he's a guy who could play more in the slot, play that nickel position. But he's more of a second, third round guy, I think, realistically. And another name, Cam Taylor-Britt out of Nebraska. Really talented player. He's a guy I toyed with. I had a lot of trouble deciding between him and Kobe Bryant at points because I like both those guys and their fit and how they would appeal to the Buccaneers and what it is they look for. But because I took an offensive lineman for the sake of this mock draft in the third round, I don't think that Cam Taylor-Britt would be there in the fourth. I think he's a third round guy specifically.
Okay.
So to summarize, I got Travis Jones in the first. He's a defensive tackle out of UConn. We talked about a bunch of other defensive tackles. Trey McBride, widely considered to be the tight end one in this draft out of Colorado State. I have him going 60th overall in the second round. We talked about the tight ends. Cole Strange out of Chattanooga, offensive guard in round 3. We have since talked about the offensive guard class and some of the names that we like there. We have just finished talking about the cornerbacks. For the sake of my draft, after the 4th round, the Bucs have 2 7th round picks. So I don't really want to get into that. I mean, you're really taking a stab there. I had them taking edge rusher / linebacker Ali Fayed out of Western Michigan. Put up some really cool numbers. Small school guy. For anyone who wants to check out that article, I've tweeted it. It's on bucksgameday.com. You can find it through Sports Illustrated, wherever you want to pull it up. But I kind of explain and rationalize why that type of player at least would make a lot of sense for them. He could come in and be a special teams contributor right away, which has to be the goal for the Buccaneers, as that's an area they're always looking to improve. And when you're drafting that late, you can't have too much higher hopes than finding a guy who can come in and make the team as a special team stud.
That'd be a huge hit.
Yeah. And that's what they did last year. Mr. Irrelevant made the damn team. Maybe not a big enough story. Grant Stewart out of Houston. He made the team. He made the team as a rookie. He played every week. He dressed. So, not so irrelevant.
No. That's
yeah.
You love those stories. Like, good for them, man. It's hard to make a 53-man roster. Not everyone, obviously, you're picked, and that doesn't guarantee you anything. So good for them. Good for them to make it.
Yeah, man. And then so I kept it on the special teams theme again with my last pick. And I took the running back out of Baylor. Treston Ebner is his name. Just a dynamic kick returner is ultimately what he is. He's a running back by trade. He's got great hands. Giovanni Bernard's on a 1-year deal. Keyshawn Vaughn, we're not sure what we got there in terms of the running back position. So I ultimately decided this would put pressure on Jalen Darden, a guy the Buccaneers moved up for in the 4th round last year and more or less fell flat on his face. I had some disparaging remarks. I hope he doesn't read in that article in relation to his performance as a rookie. I hope, like, even just to put pressure on Darden, hopefully he's going to come back with a vengeance. I don't want to give up on the kid, but he sure did not look the part last year. So, I mean, Treston Ebner is back-to-back conference special teams player of the year as a return man. That's how good he was for Baylor. Dynamic athlete, great hands. Maybe he could, best case scenario, not only does he win the kick returner duties, he actually maybe earns some reps as like a reserve third down back, behind Giovanni Bernard. Who knows?
For sure. Sure. And that's what you're taking stabs, right? You're taking flyers. And that's, to me, the guy who has shown like a propensity in college for just like making big plays. Like, yeah, let's see what he can do. Let's give him the ball. Let's let him return it. And who knows? Maybe he can flip a game or whatever and be that spark plug for you, right?
Yeah, and aside from the obvious things like fair catches and how to handle that and like the punt return game, like it's pretty straightforward. It's like the most playground like just get to the other side, right?
Yeah,
It's all
exactly.
it's an instinctive thing more so than overthinking it. So
Get the best athlete the ball, and this is a great way to do it, right? Like you don't have to, he doesn't have to get open in order to return to return a kick or a punt, right? So
exactly.
yeah, that's cool. That'd be sweet.
He doesn't have to break in at 12 and a half yards specifically, or Brady's gonna have him kicked off the team. Like he just got to return the damn ball.
Yeah, exactly. Plus his arm length, by all accounts, is normal, unlike Raj, right?
Well,
Just bringing
Raji
that back
McCurry.
to old Raji Magoo. Yeah, so
It's Magoo now.
you know what, man? I spent all day with my 7-month-old son. Everything's Magoo. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've never said Magoo in my entire life. He's Mr. Magoo. He stinks Magoo. He's Theo Magoo. I don't even know. I've mixed in a McGee. Maybe I'm just changing the end vowel at the. It's long. It's long, and I can't say that I'm dialing up my best material every day for the boy. Like I'm trying, but like I said, I'm defaulting to Magoo. I don't know where it's coming from, so I truly apologize.
Really good backstory. And don't be so hard on yourself, man. We're doing a football podcast. I'm wearing a basketball shirt
Oh, fuck.
that looks like a soccer shirt, like Adidas. Who owns Adidas? I don't know.
I did think it was potentially a Liverpool or Man U little jacket there, but I think is it Canada or the Raps?
Raptors.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
So in terms of like some of the other positions that could be addressed throughout the draft, a couple names I like. Boy Mafe out of Minnesota, really, really athletic guy with a crazy cool story. And he's really just, a specimen and someone who has that high ceiling. I mean, he's got the power and the strength to potentially kick inside. So a little bit of versatility, similar to a Logan Hall out of Houston, who I mentioned earlier, bit of a tweener. But he's a guy who fits the profile. So edge rushers, that's a guy that could be in play in there with their 27th overall pick. I got two safeties I think could be in play there. I've already gone off and over the Daxton Hill, so we don't need to speak anymore about my fondness of Mr. Dax Hill out of Michigan. One of my favorite players in the whole draft. Whoever gets him is getting a treat. And then Lewis Seen out of Georgia is another guy who apparently some teams are extremely high on.
The Georgia defense, like,
it's ridiculous.
Are you kidding?
I know, it's so stupid. It's so ridiculous.
How many guys are going to get drafted?
Dane Brewer was talking about it. They have the potential to set a record for like the most top 100 picks. It's unlikely they're going to beat, I think, an old Miami team like back in the Ed Reed days.
Team, right?
Yeah, it would have been that year probably. Yeah. So they're not going to quite beat that, but they're going to probably be second with all these guys they got, man. Like, so pretty wild. But so edge rusher is a position too. You also want depth. You want rotational pieces. And our guys over at Real Bucs Talk, they've been pounding the table for an edge rusher, as in that should be a higher priority for the Bucs than people such as myself are acknowledging. And made some compelling cases. Just, assuming JPP's gone, which he should be. No disrespect to Jason Pierre-Paul, but I think his time here is done. And we need Tryon Tranka to take that role, as mentioned. You got Shaq Barrett, so who's behind him? Who's backing him up? They don't quite have the depth there that they're going to need to find ways to supplement. So maybe they do. Maybe they decide, hey, let's go back-to-back first rounders on young, talented edge rushers and see what we can work with. But again, those safeties I love. Some other guys who could be taken later in the draft. Jalen Petrie out of Baylor probably won't be there by 60 in the second round, but I love him.
Who are just a couple names you would love to somehow get? So let's say first round dream scenario, who would that is somewhat feasible to drop to 27? Who would you love to get? And then give me two more middle round guys that you just want to somehow end up on the Bucs. I'm sure you've mentioned a couple, but maybe it didn't seem as possible when you were actually doing the mock kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, Devontae Wyatt, of course, is a dream scenario. That's the most perfect scenario. The Georgia D tackle. I'm big on Chris Olave and Traylon Burks at receiver.
Okay.
So if
I
they
was
were
going to
to
ask about receivers.
yeah, if one of them were to be there, and then Daxton Hill. Those are the 4 names I'll say that of players I'm just completely into and would be ecstatic. It would just screw position, like we were adding those guys into the mix. Hell yeah. And then like later guys who I'd like to see on the Bucs. I mean, sorry, and Andrew Booth Jr. is the other one that I mentioned, the Clemson corner.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
And then like later, like Jeremy Ruckert, if you get him in the 3rd or 4th, this Ohio State tight end, I like that a lot. You don't have to blow a 2nd round pick on a Trey McBride, sneak him in the 3rd, allows you to use that 2nd round pick on maybe one of these safeties or corners, of course, depending what happens. That's a guy who I would like to get later. Cam Taylor-Britt is a cornerback out of Nebraska. Again, that would have to be in probably the 3rd round. That's a guy I'd like to see on the Buccaneers.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, Matthew Butler out of Tennessee, an interior defensive lineman, that'd be a fun one. But in terms of like specific fits, it's just, you're throwing blind at a dartboard. So like Troy Anderson out of Montana State, I compared myself to him in a previous episode. He's just like this crazy freak athlete who was a quarterback and a running back, and now he's a linebacker out of Montana State, and not so much a need, but that'd be a cool player to see in pewter and red also.
Nice.
Yeah.
Funny. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the receivers. I actually saw is on Twitter. His name's Eric Eager. He's a sports bettor, and he said he took a little bit of he put a bit down on Jameson Williams as the first wide receiver off the board at 5-1. Is that possible?
Sorry,
this is a slight shift away from Bucs centric and more just draft centric stuff now, but I mean,
which is fine, dude.
Yeah, but 5-1, is that good enough, do you think, for him?
I mean, I don't think it's gonna happen. I just think with the injury, I think but if he wasn't hurt, then he very likely could have been. So maybe some team says, screw that, he's the best one. I don't care, we'll still take him first. I can't see Garrett Wilson, him going before a healthy Garrett Wilson, who a lot of people think is going to be Stephon Diggs. And then also a lot of people could easily be just in love with Drake London as their wide receiver 1 or a Traylon Burks. So it's just a lot of shots. Like to say 5-1 is great value for first overall.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I read that one. And sorry, the other guy I would love to see is George Pickens, Georgia.
Okay,
he's just gotten lost in the shuffle because all these guys. Pickens has been hurt. He barely played until like the end of the year. And if you were judging him off his 2019 or his last season before 20, what year was?
20.
Like he's a first rounder. And he's kind of gotten lost in the shuffle a little bit.
He looks the part too, right? Like, I mean, you can just tell with I don't know, in my opinion. Like, he looks like he's ready to go.
Totally.
And you hate to say, and like, I don't want to be blinded by the talent that Georgia had. But like, if you're playing on that, then like you're doing something right? You know what I mean? Like, it's like I feel like anybody on the Georgia defense, for example, should get the benefit of the doubt over someone else that a team is considering. And I wouldn't necessarily say the same thing about the offense at the same level as their defense, considering how dominant the defense was. But like, if you were playing on this Georgia team this past year, then you were really, really good, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, and they had to be productive on that side of the ball to have the season they had, or to be as good as they've been. And it's not like it was all on the quarterback either. But
no kidding.
Johnny Santilli, our beloved producer and editor, who occasionally shows up for work here at Bucs Banter, never on the air but always behind the scenes. Never on the air,
hype man.
Never on the air but always there. Johnny Santilli, watching on YouTube. Just so blessed you two football minds found each other, he says. What a heartwarming sentiment. Absolutely.
I feel like he's looking for some credit, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't
know.
Yeah, didn't we meet like on a
separate
basketball court? Yeah.
Separately, yeah, I think so too. I don't know what he's talking about. Yeah.
And then the only other position I think worth mentioning before we quickly dive into some breakout candidates for the Bucs this year is the running back position. Breece Hall is the best running back in this draft class, in my opinion. That's not going out on a limb by any means. I just love his combination of skills, whether it be his hands, his elusiveness, his durability, his ability to pass protect. He just translates really well to the next level. Speaking of players who have the potential to be even better in the NFL than in college, and he was damn good in college. So there you have it with him. Kenneth Walker, a name not enough people are talking about, which is funny because all you heard was Kenneth Walker all year, especially you Michigan fans, Cap?
Yeah, definitely heard his name a lot on one Saturday in October. I can tell you that. Oh my God, shoot me. Yeah, he's good. But Brees Hall, undoubtedly the best. I think in terms of just production plus what it looks like he can translate to at the next level. In the odds makers, I mean, he's not overwhelming, but he's been the first guy on their board for months now, right? So, which is really saying something because I feel like, you can throw a lot of running backs into a hat, but he's awesome.
Yeah, and Vegas has always got a beat, right? They always got a beat
Mhm.
on it. Isaiah Spiller out of A&M, he's an interesting guy. But for the Bucs, if they're going to draft a running back, it's more than likely going to be in the later rounds. You're going to be looking at guys like Damian Pierce out of Florida, Brian Robinson is coming in for a visit from Alabama, Kyron Williams out of Notre Dame, Rashad White out of Arizona State. These are just some names that could potentially be in the mix. But again, I don't consider it a priority. They got Leonard Fournette. They re-signed Giovanni Bernard for a year, and they have Keyshawn Vaughn, who I think the Buccaneers like and want to give a fair look. It's almost like he's going to have a rookie year in his third season, where he's really going to know what he's doing now. And he showed flashes this past year finally. So far from a priority, but if you love a player, you take the player. And that's something I always come back to, and I trust Jason Light to do that. Hopefully, though, the team can add a defensive tackle, a tight end, and a corner at very least. So I think that's a pretty good summary in terms of the rationale behind my selections. And Lord knows it could change between draft night a couple weeks from now. But for as it is, that's how it is. So check it out on si.com, bucksgameday.com, and give it a closer look if you want to know even more details about those players. What I want to do now is just tease a couple names, Scotty, because I'm going to have this article coming out this week within a day or two. And that is like who is poised to break out for the Buccaneers this year.
Okay.
I just want to focus on the defensive side. I picked 3 players. And the first one, we've mentioned his name numerous times. That's Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, JTS. I think based on the opportunity, based on the glimpses we saw in the limited amount of snaps he got as a rookie. I mean, he was coming to a defending Super Bowl champion, returning every starter. So he had as cushy of a first year in the NFL as you could have just based on expectations for a first round pick. Like maybe ever. Like, right?
Oh, that was so house money, whatever you got from him, and they could kind of do whatever they wanted. And he clearly showed that he can play. And I don't know, didn't hear a bad word about him the whole season, right? Like no issues. Bucs fans love him. He has to be the breakout guy. I don't mean he has to be like, or else they're fucked or anything. I just mean he's the choice, and I think the most likely.
He literally looks like an action figure. Like,
he's insane.
Yeah. Like throw on the preseason tape last year. He had a couple sacks in preseason, blew the head off Brandon Allen or whoever the Bengals quarterback was.
Right. Yeah.
It was an egregious, they called roughing the passer. He still had a couple more sacks. He sacked strip sacked Tyrod Taylor at Houston. So you got to see more flashes then than the regular season. So really excited for him. I think it could be a big year. And the next guy is one of my favorite Buccaneers, surprisingly to many, and that's Jamel Dean. And he's entering the last year of his rookie deal. He's one of those Auburn cornerbacks we talked about. And I think Jamel Dean, if he can, like, he kind of gets nicked up here and there, but when he's on the field, he's productive. He's like a analytics darling. PFF loves him. And I'll talk about that a little bit in my article when I describe why. Because it's draft season, I kind of wanted to revisit him as a prospect because the Bucs got him with the 94th or 5th pick in 2019. I was looking at his numbers at the combine. It is stupid, Jamel Dean.
Yeah.
Like, I can't believe he went in the 3rd. He's 6'2", 205. So both like incredible size. He ran a 4.30 40, which was the second fastest time in the entire combine. 99 percentile for cornerbacks. He jumped 41 inches in the vert, like 95 plus percentile. And what was the other one that was super impressive? His broad jump. I can't remember how many inches it was, but it was, again, beyond the upper echelon in terms of physical testing. So I found it kind of fun to revisit his draft stock, or his draft profile, just because now that I've seen him for a few years. So when he's on the field, Jamel Dean does his thing. He's a little mechanical at times when you watch him work. Like, he's not despite those like dynamic breakaway burst and speed he has, he's a little not awkward, but a bit mechanical sometimes, not the lateral quickness or agility you might love. But he uses his speed to just like catch up if he gets lost with that. So,
well, he was mic'd up that one game, and he kept going like, "When do we do the broad jump?" You know what I mean? It's like, I'm expected to play football. What's this whole like defending thing? I'm looking for broad jumps. I'm looking for 3-cone shuffles. Like, what's the deal?
Well, he can play too, though.
I know. I'm just kidding, but those numbers are crazy. But from the combine, like, holy shit. But I mean, hey, that'd be nice for him to really step up and really be a guy. I mean, I know that's what you're saying, but wow,
exactly.
He certainly, I think he's shown that he can, but can he do it for the whole year, right?
Exactly. So, I mean, and then you have 2 Auburn corners holding down the outside, and Carlton Davis and him. Carlton Davis is going to do his thing. Yeah. So if Jamel Dean could step up, like, he's the breakout guy who, not only do I think he has the capability to do it, but if he does, it's going to be just a monumental thing for the Buccaneers. If you got two shutdown guys, if he can be a true CB2, as they say, right, second corner, and I think he's got all the talent to do it. And then the last player is Mike Edwards. Obviously, the Buccaneers moved on to Jordan Whitehead, so that would, in theory, open up the door for Mike Edwards, who is just like the splashiest of players in terms of like generating turnovers, and his production and the amount of snaps he's played in the NFL is unbelievable. He's got like 5 career picks, and he's a reserve, and he's still on his rookie contract for like, that's just ridiculous. He had 2 pick sixes in 4 minutes in a game this year, week 2 versus the Falcons. So just a little glimpse into, for anyone who's not familiar with his affinity for creating turnovers for his team. Bucs brought in Logan Ryan and Keanu Neal, obviously, so those are technically safeties, but I view those guys more as like Swiss Army knives who are just going to kind of shuffle around, play some nickel, and just kind of be more malleable in the back of that secondary there. Whereas I think Edwards, if he can show that he's ready to take that leap, I think he'll have the chance to earn that starting gig opposite Antoine Winfield.
There you go.
There you have it. That is my 3 breakout players for the Bucs in 2022 on the defensive side of the ball. We'll save the offense for next week or for another episode, or maybe I'll just make people read that article.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there you have it. We've talked NFL draft. We broke down my Bucs 7-round mock draft, talked about a shit ton of names of players who I think are intriguing at the very least. And things will maybe get a little more clear before the draft, or maybe they'll just get a little more muffled. We'll have to see.
Always interesting. I mean, like, these mocks are basically completely insane, and no one knows what's going to happen, but they're really fun, and it's great. It's a great way to look at the position groups the way you've done it. Boom. And that was awesome. And just getting through so many names and, guys you like, who they could target, was super interesting, man. I mean, the draft is fun. It's a little bit wild because it's football and it's less, I don't want to say important, but, to really come in and make a difference, especially when you're the 27th pick on a team that's already really good. But it's super fun, and you get to talk about these new guys on the team and what they could bring, right? So, yeah, man.
For sure. And you're learning about the future of the league, right? That's what I love.
Exactly.
So when you cover it every year and you learn in depth about these guys, in a couple of years, that's all the stars in the league. So it's a fun process. So for more of that, more coverage of the NFL draft, more coverage of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, make sure you subscribe to the Bucs Banter podcast on YouTube. We're available for streaming on Spotify and Apple, all that good stuff. And also make sure you check out Bucs Game Day. Make sure you follow my boy Scott Capron here at Captain Ron, and follow me at Bucs Banter, and you'll get tons more Bucs content on the way. So thanks so much for joining us with your Wednesday evening, and can't wait to see you again soon. Till next time, go Bucs.